Hi everybody. Before we dive into inspections, let's talk about disclosures. Disclosures are different from inspections. Disclosures are when the seller tells you, that is, discloses to you important stuff about the house. 50 years ago, the general attitude was buyer beware. It wasn't the seller's job to tell you what was wrong with the house. It was your job to find out what was wrong with the house. Over the decades, however, state law and court rulings across the country have shifted the attitude more towards seller beware. Nowadays, sellers are supposed to tell the buyer everything they know about the property that might be important to the buyer. These are called seller disclosures. Many states are very specific about what a seller is supposed to disclose. California has the natural hazard disclosure form where sellers disclose if the property is in an earthquake zone or in a wildfire zone, and so on. Federal law requires that all homes must disclose if a home was built before 1978 because the house may have lead-based paint in it. Like inspections, seller disclosures give you information that can help you figure out if you want to buy the house, and if so, how much you're willing to pay for it. I've heard of home buyers in Arizona who freaked out and immediately canceled their contracts as soon as they read in the seller disclosures that the seller occasionally sees scorpions inside the house. Seller disclosures protect the buyer, but they also help protect the seller from being sued by the buyer later on. The buyer usually signs off that they received the seller's written disclosure. That way the buyer can't come back later on and say they didn't know about something that the seller had told them in the seller's written disclosures. Finally, did you notice that I said that sellers are supposed to disclose? Not that sellers always actually do disclose? Some home sellers, especially banks and especially investors, will say they've never lived in the house so they have nothing to disclose. Well, that's just silly. They still know a lot about the house. They at least know what money they've spent on repairs, but banks and investors, for example, often don't disclose anything. If your landlord seems to be withholding information in their disclosures, that's a big red flag. That tells you to be extra thorough in your own inspections. One of the advantages of hiring a real estate attorney or real estate agent is they can help you with getting disclosures from the seller. They know what the seller is supposed to disclose to you. They'll also be able to help you figure out what inspections you should get done in your particular situation. Speaking of which, now let's go back to home inspections.